I have tried as hard as I can to not make race a major component of my content. The reason for this is because I think many of the issues I discuss affect people regardless of their ethnicity. If I could assign another reason to my decision, it would probably be that I never really found it to be something worth harping on. But there is a segment of people who you're going to see the comments of throughout my commentary that have this obsession with my race. And it's one thing to notice something, but it's another to attack a person over that which they cannot control. But that seems to be the hallmark of computer clowns, so while I speak, I'm not going to address each comment one on one like I usually do. They'll just serve as the backdrop of the video. I'm also only using the screenshots where the N word is written with the ER at the end of it instead of the A. I consider them one and the same, but there are some people who can trick themselves into giving people who type this to me the benefit of the doubt, seeing them call me the N word as some term of endearment just because the last letter is different. I have people who try to link me with being an I word, and I've always disputed this because I don't congregate in any groups and I don't believe a team of people should have a monopoly on an opinion. But one of the ironies that comes from linking me with these people is that oftentimes I words are described as racist, and you even have some publications that try to say that these men are white supremacist. Yet notice how these men who don't agree with me and are thus nominally on the side of women are making racist comments towards me. This is part of the stupidity of my detractors that you must have undesirable traits if you are unable to attract a woman, such as exhibiting racism. I find these comments very interesting because they show the ugly side of my detractors, and I'm not even referring to the ones that write this type of stuff, but more so another coalition of women defenders that still appear on my channel to this day. They tend to mostly show up on streams, but they've also appeared on videos in some instances, and their comments are generally trying to paint me as not only being incorrect, but indicting me as a person with some type of analysis directed at my personality. And I'll never understand how you can display such harsh rhetoric towards a guy whose greatest sin, in your view, is speaking about his difficulty with acquiring a romantic partner, but you find yourself speechless as though your mouth's been filled with cement when someone calls that same man racial slurs. Let's talk about slavery, as I'm going to draw an analogy between it and some of the underlying rhetoric that my detractors use. From the time of the U.S.'s beginnings to the middle point of the Civil War, blacks were enslaved by whites. At the root of it were beliefs that people, particularly minority groups, are of some lesser inherent value than their white counterparts. If you really listen to and think about the rhetoric of these men and what they think you should have to do in order to get romantic reciprocation from a woman, there is a slavery subtext. You have a person, a random woman, who hasn't done anything for you, but who you owe everything to. You owe her your indefinite interest, you owe her exercising, and you owe her climbing up the wealth and social ladders. These are not the steps taken of someone who wants to or is expected to be someone's equal, because their potential partners, modern women, are not being asked to undergo these radical transformations for the slightest hope of attracting men. The reason you don't see modern women upset with this disparity is because it entirely benefits them. They get to sit on their high horse and be approached by loads of men in real life, but mostly on social media, who oftentimes do anything in their power to boost their chances of dating her, while these women do nothing to appeal to men. They don't want a partner, they want a slave. Now, let's speak in terms of facts. It's a fact that most people date someone of their own ethnicity. It's also a fact that most people use the internet to some capacity. This means that the majority of the time, if I seek a romance online, I am at an inherent disadvantage due to most of the women online being of other ethnicities than my own, and thus more susceptible to reciprocating the romantic interest of a man that is of their own race, and almost all of them have multiple options, and certainly more than I do at any given time. And we need to make this very clear. I am not saying women of other ethnic groups will automatically refuse to date someone of a race that is not their own, but what I am saying is that this is something that could happen multiple times, and still would go completely undisclosed by my detractors who seek to ignore this fact as part of an effort to blame me for anything and everything. I've also said before that I'm an accepting person. I have standards like anyone else, but there are a lot of things I can tolerate in a partner that I probably wouldn't find preferable. For example, I would date someone who smokes, drinks, or has tattoos despite never doing or having these things myself. What needs to be understood is that not everyone is as accepting as I am. In my opinion, I think we live in an era where people are very open to having platonic relationships with anyone, regardless of what they look like. But when it comes to romantic relationships, it's a whole different story. When it comes to romance, women in particular are more likely to be extremely selective, borderline impossible to appeal to. They're the complete opposite if they try to friend zone you. This is why, at the same time as it's harder to get a woman to go on a date than sneeze with your eyes open, it's easy to get one of them to talk to you for an indefinite time. But when you consider the impossibility that often comes with trying to appeal romantically to a modern woman, another undisclosed element are external factors, things that are objectively out of your control, but that you pay the price for nonetheless. If you want to date a woman, but she already has a boyfriend, that was out of your control. If you want to date a woman, but she won't pay you any attention as she speaks to 5, 10, or 20 other men, that was out of your control. And if a woman doesn't want to date a man because of his race, that was out of your control. But the thing about external factors is twofold. One, these men that defend women no matter what will never admit to any of them because it legitimizes the reality of a man's lack of culpability if a woman doesn't reciprocate interest in him. And two, you can never count on a woman to admit to most of these factors if they are in fact taking place. And in the case of not wanting to date someone because of their race, it does make a bit of sense. After all, we live in the anything and everything is accepted era. And a woman might not want to admit to having a racial bias in terms of who she's interested in romantically because such commentary can be interpreted as racist. While I am someone who is open to dating a woman from any ethnic group, I would never call someone racist if they do not want to date someone who's black because I think people should be allowed to have standards. And some people, unlike me, have standards that are pertaining to race. But here's something I take an issue with. Now, I've mentioned in the past that in several instances where I've had people comment on my romantic views, I get accused of just wanting sex, in spite of often mentioning that my ultimate goal was a long term relationship, and it wouldn't make any sense for me to approach and talk to random women for weeks or months on end when I could just pay a hooker for intercourse if it was something I so heavily desired. But one thing I never brought up much was the implicit racism displayed by hookers. Oftentimes, when I would go on a site like Backpage and browse some of the escorts there, I would see no AA posted in their descriptions. No AA means no African Americans. These hookers are refusing to engage in sexual acts with men of African descent, and I'm going to explain to you why I'm disgusted by this. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I have no problem with a regular woman not being attracted to black men. But when you are a hooker, when you offer your body for a price, when your body is effectively your business and you choose to single out black men as not being allowed access to it, I see that as discriminatory. I see it as racist that a person running a business, however lewd or promiscuous it may be, would openly express no interest in doing business with someone on the basis of their race. These hookers might as well put a whites only sticker on their vaginas. Or at least they would do that if they only treated white men with reverence while discriminating against all others. However, it's only black men. In all the years of being on Backpage and looking at all of these listings, I never once saw any post that banned white men or Hispanic men or Asian men from doing business with them. Leave it to women to practice openly racist business policies in the 21st century. And of course, nobody will criticize them for this. Thank God Hitler didn't have a vagina, otherwise, we'd still be hearing about her tragic backstory and why she had to put Jews in Auschwitz. I want you to consider the fact that some of the hookers who post no AA are black. I said earlier that most people date someone their own race, but what do you say when your own ethnic group is discriminatory against itself? You have some black women And there are black men who do this as well, who will not date someone of their own race. And while I think they should have the right to make a decision like that, it's a decision that reinforces one of my talking points. The subject of romance, and more particularly never ending romantic rejection, is a nuanced topic that requires more than short sighted and narrow minded analysis to fully understand why this happens to so many men. Now, I've been showing you a screenshot of the Valley Scott blog for two reasons. One, because it demonstrates that no AA was posted by hookers so often that other people saw it. And two, because there is a part of their article on this topic that I really want to read. It discusses the nuances of why escorts will post no AA, but also doesn't try to make excuses for the more sinister intentions of the women who post this. I'm going to read the part of the article that I found the most interesting, and it does contain a few words at the end that I don't like to use. And I've said before that I don't use the N word, but I'm going to read it aloud because I think doing that will make it less easy for people hearing this to pretend this wasn't something a woman said. This is no simple issue. There are no simple answers. Many sex workers have expressed to me that they have agonized over their choice to say no AA. For others, it was an easy choice. One provider told me of being raped by an African American client. Since that time, she has never felt comfortable with seeing any African American men. Another has two sons whom she had with her now deceased African American husband. She doesn't wish to see any African American clients because it reminds her too much of the man she loved and lost. But another told me straightforward, "I don't fuck niggers." Her exact words. So let's put this into perspective. I did a video where I called no one anything derogatory whatsoever, and in response, I was called racial slurs. If I asked out women in real life, I get rejected over and over again. If I ask out women on the internet, I get rejected over and over again. The one instance where I wasn't rejected was a gold digger, and I'm accused by my detractors of just wanting sex, which weren't my true intention, would only lead me to interact with a series of escorts who would discriminate against me on the basis of my ethnicity. And people wonder why I don't want to bother with asking out women and why I don't find any of this appealing. My detractors will never admit that race matters in dating, and the reason they don't is because to acknowledge it would be to admit that there are certain external factors completely out of my control. If you are a black male, there will always be women, including some of your own race, who will automatically find you unappealing because of your ethnicity. This doesn't mean you will never find a partner, but it does mean that there are disadvantages that are unique to you on the basis of something you can't control. The reason I've never felt bad about anything I've referred to women as is because no one ever feels bad when I am called something. When someone comes on my video to call me a racial slur, there are no defenses towards yours truly or negative character analysis imposed on these parasites for typing trash. You can have one-sided empathy where you pick and choose who to defend, but you can't expect the rest of us to go along with your double standards. I'm not saying it's all of them, but it's a lot of them. Modern women are attention-seeking, selfish, grandstanding, racist whores. And I've had to accept the reality that most of them will assess me by the color of my skin rather than the content of my character, and that I will never be recognized for anything outside of being narrowly defined by my physical appearance. But at the very least, I hope this has helped you to understand the ways in which I have been marginalized for my unpopular color.